And today's topic is going to be around those different toolkits that you might want to use with TED. So the key focus of today is how different toolkits can be adapted to different team situations, or how teams can work on different themes using the toolkits in TED. It's the first time we've done a session like this. There's such a lot of toolkits that we could go in lots of different directions with this. So what I've done today is chosen a few typical team scenarios that we see quite often. But the idea is to showcase some of the toolkits that you might want to recommend to your teams, and then just get an idea of how you might adapt it, because if you're anything like me, the toolkit sort of gives you the starting point, but quite often I might sort of tweak it a little bit or think around what are the specifics of this team, how might we run it a little bit differently. So the toolkits are there really just to provide a framework, but it's not to say you have to stick to them word for word or do it exactly in the steps. And I do tell that often to team leaders: feel free to flex them in a way which you feel suits the way your team works, the type of team you are, and the sort of culture of your team. So we're going to go into that as we go through today. Please do feel free to share your own views and opinions if you've used any of the tools that I'm talking about, and if there's any other tools you think will complement the ones I'm suggesting, please do suggest those as I go through today's session. So we currently have 112 different toolkits on TED. And we're adding more every year. So I think over the last 3 years since we've launched TED on our website, externally facing website, and we've had likes of yourselves join us in the collaborative, we've been trying to add more and more tools that are relevant to some of the challenges, I guess, that teams are facing in today's climate. So our toolkits cover the 8 different themes that we've got within TED. And those themes are backed by research, which is why we put them into TED in the first place. That the research that sits behind TED shows that these themes are the things that make the difference between high performing teams and teams that might struggle or experience conflict or a range of different issues. So the idea is that if we can sort of nudge teams to work on these core factors and use the toolkits to improve these factors, then they'll move closer and closer to working in the best way that they possibly can. In the toolkits, we've got a range of things from team leader guides on different topics to workshop activities that teams might want to embed into a team meeting or an away day or some kind of forum that they might have. We've got coaching tools in there to help team leaders ask the right types of questions and elicit responses and engagement from their team. We've also got things like example action plans. We've got templates for different things that teams can work on. And we've got some case studies as well, so teams can look at others who might be similar, who've experienced success through using TED. When we first developed the TED toolkit, I guess really the toolkits came before TED really. Our intention, like teaching when we first put this together, was to create a bit of a one-stop shop for all our team engagement activities that you might wish to use in different team settings. So we found at the time that our OD team was creating an awful lot of different materials to meet different types of teams in different settings, and it was quite labor intensive because every team that came to us, we were designing something new, and it might be just a tweak on something we'd done for another team, or it might be something that someone else had done with a different team across the trust. So we really wanted to sort of pool our resources together and avoid any duplication of work, but also save us a bit of time and energy in developing those things. So we had a starting point ready for different teams. So that initial purpose behind the toolkit was to avoid that duplication and give us a go-to repository for our OD team to dip into. Initially, we collated the resources that we'd created that we used regularly in classrooms and at things like away days. But as we grew this, we grew our library, we started to recognize that there were an awful lot of things that our teams were using that maybe team leaders had created, or maybe they'd brought from previous organizations they'd worked with, or that they'd learned from different settings, or that they'd developed themselves. So what we wanted to do is include some of these team created resources that we saw different teams having success with across our trust. This realization led us to think about standardizing the tools we already had, so that it didn't need a qualified OD practitioner. You didn't need to have amazing facilitation skills to run these tools. So we could create something which was both accessible for different people to use, but also transferable, so that it wasn't specific to any one team context. It wasn't just for clinical teams, it wasn't just for corporate teams. It could be picked up and applied and then flexed in a way that any team could pick up and use it. And that quickly sort of influenced the direction we went with our TED Toolkit. So the toolkit that we've got today is intended to appeal to any type of team, whether they're small or large, whether they're a remote working team or they're all together. Maybe they might be a corporate team or an operational team. The idea is that any type of team, any size of team can pick up a TED Toolkit and adapt it to meet their specific needs, use it to prompt meaningful conversations, which is we want teams to do through TED, so that they could think about their own ways of working. And since we've launched our collaborative, so in the last 2 or 3 years, you've helped us create additional resources. So across our collaborative, we've had some great suggestions for new themes that we could work on, new suggestions, and sharing resources that you might already be using in your own organizations that would benefit other colleagues across our TED collaborative. And in the last couple of years, we've developed toolkits on topics such as the staff survey, on zero tolerance, on civility, team leader facilitation skills, and a range of others. And we're always looking for new ideas of how we can continue to innovate and continue to give teams the things that are most relevant to the way that they're working today. So combining all these resources and information together, the TED Toolkits become one of our fundamental pillars of what TED is. I think when Sam and I talk to new organizations, it's often the toolkit that is one of the most exciting things for a new organization coming on board with TED, that it gives you a go-to resource that you can dip into. And definitely for us as OD practitioners who might be supporting different teams, it helps to have something that's there as a starting point. It might not be all you use with a team, but it can definitely save you a lot of time and effort in development if you've got something there that either you can signpost the team to, or you can build into your own sessions and your own support that you use. And that's definitely how we use it at Lancs Teaching. So what I'd like to cover today is 3 different team settings, ones that reflect teams that I've worked with, and I'm sure we'll be familiar with many of you who are supporting teams in your own organizations. I've picked out different toolkits that suit these different types of teams, and these are the ones on the screen here. So I'm going to look at newly formed teams. We're going to look at teams with maybe culture challenges or behavioral challenges that they're experiencing. And we're also going to look at teams that are going through some element of change. So whether they've got a change on the horizon, whether they're in the middle of a change, or even teams that are looking to reflect on a change that might have happened. And we know that's the case for many of our teams across the NHS, that it's been quite a turbulent few years for NHS teams. So really, I think a lot of these factors will apply to many different teams, and in some teams it might be all 3 of these or a couple of these that applies. So I'm going to go into each of these in a little bit more depth. So first one is a new team, and when I'm thinking about a new team, it might be a team that is maybe has a new team leader. So they've got maybe some new direction about them, or maybe they've got a team leader who's looking to understand the team more. And that can be a good reason for a new team leader to use TED to get a quick snapshot of what's the team I'm moving into here, what's the team culture currently like. Another thing which might put a team into this category is if there's a significant amount of new team members. So definitely if you're a brand new team, it might be that everybody's meeting each other for the first time. You've no experience of how different people like to work. You're still establishing your ways of communication. And if we think about that team development curve, you're sort of in the sort of forming and norming stages, and there's a bit of storming going on that you might want to use TED to be able to navigate better. Also, this might apply to project teams. So we see this an awful lot in the NHS, that we might have multidisciplinary teams set up for a particular project. They might come together really quickly for some kind of initiative or something that's happening. For us, we run yesterday I was teaching on our microsystem coaching academy, where learners work on improvement projects and might be putting together a team to work on an improvement or a change process. And this is where they might bring together new colleagues and form a new team. This might even include members who are initially part of one team, but then form differently for a specific reason. And that might be a good reason to use TED in a sub-team, maybe. And final one I've got on here is team mergers. And this is something we've seen quite a lot recently. I know we've had quite a lot of our partner organizations talk to us about restructures that might have been going on in their organization, where maybe two teams have been coming together. Maybe teams are sort of changing the ways that they're working, but if teams are coming together to form a new type of team, this again might be a situation where we're classing them as a new team who might benefit from focusing on some of the new team toolkits that we have in TED. So when I have worked with new teams in the past, my experience is that these topics tend to come up quite often. And these are the ones which definitely I feel new teams can benefit from focusing on in TED. I think one of the questions I get quite often when a new team comes together is, how long should we leave it before we use TED? And the answer to that can be different for every single team. I would suggest giving it at least a month, so that the team does get to know each other a little bit and start to work together so they've got some experience to be able to answer some of the statements in TED. But what I'd also say is there's no reason you have to wait till you've done the survey to be able to use some of the toolkits. There might be some that are appropriate to use even before you've done your survey, and then use the TED survey maybe a month or two down the line after the team has formed and established those working relationships to check in on how it's going. Definitely team purpose. I think a few of you mentioned that one in the chat. Team purpose is one that is relevant to a lot of teams, not just newly formed teams. I think this can be a good one to refer back to. But working together for new teams who are perhaps unsure around how they're going to collaborate, how they want to communicate, it's definitely a useful topic. And then also valuing individuals as well. So making sure everyone feels welcomed in a new team, everyone feels that they can contribute and that they have a role to play. And that can be so important when a team's building those new foundations. So the toolkits I've pulled out today. So first one is a getting to know you exercise. I don't know if any of you might have used something like this in the past, but I think this is a really good one for a newly formed team. It's a fun activity, really. It's for team members to share facts about their interests, their motivators and past experiences, And I've seen teams adapt this in different ways. So I had one team where the team leader asked everybody to bring in an object that was meaningful to them. So you might bring in a favorite book or a special trinket, something from an amazing holiday you've been on, maybe a family heirloom or other interesting knickknacks, different things. And this is a great way to let colleagues know who you are and be able to share and learn a bit about different people, learn about what their interests are outside of work. But what I've found is when teams run this activity, it can often then lead to conversations around what are your motivations inside of work? Why have you come to work in the NHS? What are you looking to get out of work? And I think if new teams have these types of conversations, they're really good ways to be able to build those interpersonal relationships to create that sense of togetherness. And also see opportunities where you can recognize each other and bring your own individuality into the team as well. So a really good exercise and a fun one as well that can be adapted to different team settings. It's something which you could do in a morning team brief. It doesn't have to be a long exercise, or it could be the start of an away day or the first time a team comes together, maybe. Next one. So after those initial introductions, a useful topic, as I said, for a new team to look at is this topic of team purpose. So our team vision tools, we have a couple of different ones in TED, and these are great ways of teams exploring their purpose to create a sense of togetherness. So for new teams, these activities can help team members set off in the desired direction, but also helps to build that confidence that everyone's working together and pulling in the same direction. So it quickly establishes that, I guess it's that sort of North Star that you're heading together, heading towards as a team. So when I've run this session for new teams in the past, I've found quite often they're quickly able to identify the core features or core factors of what they're there to do. So what that core team purpose is. But often it's the conversations that come out of that getting a clear team purpose about then leads to, because it then allows you to start to talk around how do we communicate in the best way to allow us to achieve that purpose? How do we make sure we collaborate or work together? Where might there be risks on the horizon? So it can then quickly sort of move into those wider TED themes once a team has got that clear team purpose. So these tools can often be useful for established teams as well. So it's not to say that they're just for new teams. And I do use these ones quite often with any team, really. And it can be a really good topic to go back to if a team is unsure where to start. So if I get a team leader who's maybe got results that are kind of similar right the way across the survey, maybe everything's in the middle, or there's maybe everything's green and you know they're not sure where to start. But I think always coming back to your team purpose helps to remind the team of what they're there for, how they want to work together, and it helps them to then prioritize the things that might be on their mind or the key priorities, so that it is always geared towards that key team purpose or strategy. Sam, I know you're keeping an eye on the chat, you're popping some things in there, but yeah, really good resources to use and ones I would recommend for lots of different teams in lots of different settings. Next up, so final one for new teams is the role clarity exercise. So what this one does is it asks team members to share details about their role to the wider team. So in small teams, the way I've seen this work is that each individual might want to say a few words around topics such as what their role entails, maybe what a typical day looks like. They might want to share what challenges there are in their particular role. So maybe are there particular pressure points about their day or about their working week, and also what motivates them to do their job. And this can be a really good way of team members gaining an appreciation of the different roles that make up their team, also how roles contribute to that core team purpose, but also what makes different individuals tick, and what really excites them about their role and what their motivation is for doing the type of role that they do. In larger teams, what I've seen done is you might group team members up. So you might have a group that wishes to present together. So I've seen in some of our larger clinical teams, the HCAs might have given their own bit of a presentation or a bit of a speech around what it is to be HCA, what they do in their role, how they help and support. And then the admin support might give a bit of a presentation. The managers might give a bit of a presentation, all talking around what it is to do their role, what types of jobs they do. And often it can be quite eye-opening for other team members who do different types of roles to get a real insight into what are the complexities of those roles sometimes. And it can help people understand how they can contribute to help those roles work alongside their own role. If there's time, so this is one that can be done quite quickly. I've seen some teams do a bit of a role showcase where every Monday a different team member does a bit of a presentation, and they'll do it over a course of weeks and months. But if you're doing this maybe as part of an away day, you might then want to build on those conversations that go on. So you might then ask the wider team to discuss each role and think around, how can we support that person in their role? Where are there opportunities where we can collaborate together? And how can we build on what we already know about those roles? So again, it's helping to create that shared appreciation across the team, but it also helps to encourage ideas of where you can perhaps improve the way you work together, or support each other when you know there are tough times or challenging parts of people's roles. So a really useful one, and one that I've seen teams get a lot of value out of as well. Okay. I'll just throw the question out there. Any other tools you might have used with new teams? Any that I've not mentioned there? Oh, non-specific. Do pop them in the chat if you think of any others as we go through. Okay, so next type of team that I wanted to focus on was teams with culture or behavioural challenges. Now, this is one that I think we do see quite often, and I think definitely in quite a pressurised climate that a lot of teams are working on, that this can be something which raises its head. Types of teams that we might refer to under this banner might be teams where there's evidence of negative behaviours emerging. Maybe there's a bit of conflict in the team arising. It might also be situations where there are freedom to speak up indicators that are coming from different sources, indicating that there are cultural challenges or behaviour challenges within a team. Or it might be through an elevated amount of complaints, and this could be from team members, or it might be people outside the team. So there are a range of indicators that might be showing you this. And what you might also see in teams is evidence of incivility as well. So those, again, negative behaviours, things creeping into a team's culture that a team might be trying to address through TED. I think quite often in my experience, it's these sorts of situations where we get asked to come in and support, where a team leader might feel they need that little bit of extra advice or support and what's the right thing to do. But I think it's also important to remember with this topic that TED isn't intended to be a performance management tool. So it's not something which is intended to focus around one or two individuals. It should be for the whole team. So often it's important to make sure that we're applying TED in the right way, because TED isn't a substitute for performance management, and it wouldn't be right to pull a whole team through an activity for something that might be more of an individual issue. So I think when I'm contracting with team leaders, it's always important to get that right and make sure that TED is the right approach in these sorts of scenarios. But what we do with that is we'd look for other evidence. It might be things like our staff survey results are suggesting that the culture in a particular team might need working on, or that there are multiple different reports of things going on that we might want to tackle in terms of a culture approach with TED. So some of the toolkits, in terms of some of the key themes that I see arising from teams like this, often engagement is one that scores lower in teams where perhaps there is a negative culture in the team, or the team feels stuck in some way, shape or form. Working together again comes up if there's evidence of conflict in the team. If the team's struggling to be cohesive, then working together might score a little bit lower. And also this theme of valuing individuals, and this is one which might come through things like staff survey, where individuals don't feel valued by those around them, where maybe you are getting things like complaints or freedom to speak up requests coming through about a team where individuals don't feel they're able to share their views in that team environment. So this is an area where TED can help, but it can also be an area where TED might be one of a number of different interventions that you're making, depending on the sort of scale and nature of the team you're working with. So in terms of useful toolkits and some that we've developed specifically for these types of teams, first off, I mentioned earlier about our zero tolerance resources. These are quite new into TED. I think only in the last 12 months we've added these in there. But these resources ask teams to explore behaviours that could be letting them down. The principles to create a space where colleagues call out behaviours and are able to take shared ownership without pointing the finger at individuals. So it's about identifying the behaviours and thinking of what are constructive ways that we can challenge those behaviours. The premise relies on highlighting how every team member contributes to the team's culture, and that culture is a major influence on the behaviours that people exhibit. So quite often the behaviours that people might exhibit in a team, and especially if they're negative behaviours, quite often there is a result of maybe that individual feeling under pressure, or feeling not supported, or feeling that their voice isn't heard. So what these toolkits do is aim to help a team start to work towards that culture. So in TED, we've got a zero tolerance PowerPoint presentation, which guides a team leader and a team through a zero tolerance conversation. And there's also a top tips guide for team leaders as well, to help them hold a conversation around this topic with the team. The goal is to identify behaviours that the team decides that it won't tolerate, and together be able to co-create an approach for being able to challenge those behaviours, and to be able to learn from situations where they don't get it quite right. So it's all designed around this learning culture being built into the team, so teams can understand the situations that are affecting them and work to get better at them as they learn together. When I've seen teams use this framework, I've noticed how, again, it can help to create a sense of shared accountability in the team, as well as opportunities to view challenges that a team might face as that opportunity to learning, rather than an opportunity for conflict and where there's disagreements. Next up, we've got our Exploring Team Culture Toolkit. And I know, Sam, you've used this one recently, haven't you, I think? But this is one of my go-to resources as well. It's a great tool for a host of different team settings. And essentially it involves a one-pager with a range of different culture related words. Some are positive, some are negative, some are a bit neutral in there as well. And the idea is that team members will consider the different words on there. It can either be the main focus of a development session, or it can be a quick and simple sense check of people's thoughts and feelings to get a temperature check on a team's culture. When I've run this activity with teams, I typically ask team members to underline 5 words that describe their current team culture, and then also to star 5 words that indicate their desired team culture. And what that does, because we're restricting them to just 5 words, it gets them to really think around what are the things I see about our current team culture, and also what would I like our team to aspire to. What I'd then do is I'd ask team members to call out the words that they've underlined, keeping a tally of the different words that occur. I'd get everyone to put their hand up if they've underlined the same word. And we create a sense of where there is consistency in the words that they're picking up. So what are the strong ones that are coming through? Also, what are the differences as well? So it can be useful for team members to think about what other people are seeing in the team and recognize that diversity that they might have in the team, so that it can then prompt conversations around where those commonalities and differences are in different perceptions. An optional extra activity for if you've got a bit more time with this is you could also ask the team to circle words which describe how they think others see their team's culture. So this can add further context, opportunity for reflection, and opportunity for discussion amongst the team. And then the final step would be for the team to look at the differences between where they see themselves now and where they aspire to be. And that then leads to that conversation around what are the next steps between our current team culture and where we want to be. And that can lead really well into perhaps some of those team purpose conversations, or maybe the zero tolerance conversations around how do we iron out some of the things we don't want to see in our team culture, and how do we start to bring in some of those things that we aspire to be, and how do we build on things that we perhaps already do well. But as I say, really useful resource. I think this is a really good one to have in your back pocket, because it can be a quick and simple topic, or it can be sort of expanded to a more sort of in-depth session that you might have with a team. And final one on culture or behavior challenges for teams is the team culture contract. So this is often one that I use after that last team culture activity, and all this is really is an example contract that is designed for teams to co-create a shared commitment to each other. Its intention is to summarize what they've discussed in their culture conversations. So they'd be taking into account the things they've got out of the TED survey, maybe the things they've got from the other activities that they've done, and then be able to create a resource that they can refer back to and even measure as the team goes forward. So in the example that I've got, when you download this, it's one that's filled in, but it's basically just a table which asks some key questions that the team might want to refer back to. But the ones I've used in there are from Professor Damien Hughes's book, The Barcelona Way, where he talks about having humility, hard work, and being a team player at the core of those high performance cultures that he worked with and that he saw in successful sports teams. I think having those things in provides useful food for thought when teams are thinking around what are our key behaviours which we want to encourage, we want to recognise and celebrate. What do we want to bring in, and what do we want to remind ourselves as the sort of core factors that we want to be recognised for and we want to see throughout our team. And again, this might be something that leads on to further work in a team where they do start to talk about how do we want to recognise this, how do we celebrate success when we achieve this, but also a bit of that reflection around where is it going to be hard to do this, where are the risks in this, or where are the barriers to doing this, and how are we going to tackle those sorts of situations. So again, this is something that can be quite a short and quick activity, or it can be expanded or even revisited regularly as a team evolves. And I've seen some teams adapt this every couple of months. They'll come back to the team contract and they'll have a meaningful conversation around, does it still feel right? Did we set out with the right intentions, or is there something that might have changed now? So the idea is it can be sort of a living document that a team works on, but something that's really useful. And then final type of team that I wanted to sort of reflect on today is teams that are navigating change. So when I think about teams that are navigating change, it really could describe a lot of different teams, because there are lots of changes going on for every team. I'm sure any team's going through a change at one point or another, but when I thought about this, teams I've seen with significant changes might be ones where there are changing personnel, maybe sort of changing role profiles in the team possibly, or it might be where there are changing processes in a team. So it might be where they're bringing in new working practices, maybe it's a new working location, a new ward, or even a new site altogether. It might be where there's new policies and procedures coming through, possibly. It could also be where there's a change in team structure. So I mentioned earlier, it might be there's a change in the management structure for a team, or maybe there's an organization restructure that's affecting a team, or just a team restructure in terms of how that hierarchy is working or how you're going to collaborate. Or it might also be those changing relationships outside of the team. So this could come if a team is suddenly working alongside different external teams. Maybe it might be different individuals or even other organizations that a team might work with. These can often be times which lead to uncertainty for team members, and it can lead to perhaps teams losing their way a bit with the team purpose. So it's often an important thing to be mindful of when a team is undergoing change. Some of the themes, I really could have picked a number of the TED themes, but the three I've picked out here are ones that I've seen from teams going through change. Leadership is definitely a common one. So I think leadership is so important when a team's going through a change. It's important that leaders sort of inspire confidence in that change that's happening, but also can show that support. I also think it's somewhere where team leaders can struggle quite a lot when they are going through change, because quite often they don't have all the answers that team members might be looking for. And because there is perhaps uncertainty around a change, it can be really tough for a team leader. I did find this quite a lot as we were going through the heights of the pandemic, that team leaders I were coaching at the time really struggled because they couldn't give the support that they wanted to give to their team. They didn't necessarily have all the answers. So leadership is definitely an area where it's important to think about when a team's going through change, and where the TED toolkits can help support leaders and help give them confidence that they're doing the right thing. And again, the TED survey in itself helps to give them that measurable, tangible feedback on what are the right things to work through in a time of change. The other ones I've highlighted, working with other teams. As I suggested, a change might involve new team relationships. You might be forming those different networks that work with your team, new ways of collaborating, and then also review and celebrate success. So I think often when teams are going through a change, they don't take the time to reflect on the things that they have achieved, because they're so focused on what's the next part of that change, what's the next thing that's happening. So it is really important to build that resilience in teams by reviewing the things that you have achieved together. First toolkit that I've pulled out on this one is the job demand resource model. I think it's called the job demand model. So you might have heard of this one before, but this one is something that a team leader could use before a change is happening. And it's really about helping either a team or the team leader reflect on what support might be needed as a change is happening. Essentially, this model provides a framework for assessing some of the perhaps risks or vulnerabilities that might be involved in a complex change. And it can be used in a range of different ways. So as I say, the team leader might use it themselves as a mechanism for personal reflection and assessing the team, or a team could use it as part of a workshop and use the model to provoke discussion around where are the pressure points for us, where might there be challenges for us as we tackle the change. Or it might be that a team leader uses this with individual team members, and a team leader might use this during one-to-ones to help team members reflect on their own role, think about the personal impact that a team change might have on them, and think around how they as individuals might contribute to changes that are happening. So a useful one, and I think this is one, because this is perhaps one which because it's based on a model, sometimes this can scare team leaders away, but really it doesn't have to be over complex. It's really just a reflection tool that I'd encourage a team leader to have a look at. Next one is the our change tools. Oh, in fact, no, it's not. That's the next one. It should say on there, team network map. I've not changed my title on that one. So the team network map is an excellent way to explore relationships with different teams. So the activity is around asking the group to reflect on the different types of relationships they have with others. I've used this as part of departmental away days to help teams consider how they fit into the bigger picture across the organisation, sometimes even across the region or even the NHS as a whole. When I've run this activity, what I typically do is ask teams to, on a flip chart, add their team name to the centre of the flip chart, and then on different post-it notes, write down the names of other teams, other individuals, maybe other organisations that they work alongside or that impact on their team's role. The next steps then, once the team's done that, is I'd ask the team to place those post-its relative to the closeness that they have with that other team or individual or organisation. So for instance, a close, maybe day-to-day working relationship, you'd place that close to the centre of your flip chart, and a distant, maybe infrequent, or maybe one that's just a information giving sort of transaction, you'd place that further away from the center, so you'd only have that distant relationship with that team or organization maybe. So as groups complete their map, I ask them to share it with others, and prompt discussion around those different perspectives of what those relationships are. The final stage of this then, I'd ask the groups to consider if any of those relationships need changing, because sometimes teams may feel that they do need a closer relationship with certain teams. You might also feel that you don't need to be as close to certain teams. Maybe that relationship has shifted over time and it is more appropriate to move away from certain teams and address that balance in different times. So this can be a really useful resource to help groups consider those different types of relationships, whether it is internal to the organisation or whether it concerns whole regions or multiple different stakeholders in the way that a team works. Next one, here we go. This is our change tool. So the next one, which can be useful for teams going through a change, are the tools we have on our change conversations. So these resources aim to encourage teams to reflect on changes that have either happened or are currently in the process of happening, using coaching, maybe common OD style questions. The toolkits prompt conversations around things such as what's gone well around the way that we work or the way the change has happened so far, i.e. you might be thinking around what can we celebrate, you might be thinking around what can we give recognition for in terms of the journey we've come on already. You might also be asking the team, what does good look like? So that more future focused question, what do we want to aim for? You might also ask teams, what are things like currently? So get that sense check of where are we at on our journey through this change? How far are we away from where we aspire to? And also, where are we in relation to where we started? Are there things where we're maybe going in the wrong direction that we want to address? Or are there things we can celebrate and give recognition for? It also prompts that question around what gets in the way. So again, there's a theme through a lot of these toolkits. It's really just around prompting that open conversation. It's around thinking, where do we want to be? What is the journey we're on? Are we happy with that? Are we all confident? And are we on the same page with the way we're working with that? So the aim of these resources, as with many of these different toolkits, is to encourage teams to take a step back from perhaps the day-to-day things that they're concerned with and consider if there's anything that they want to change. When using this as part of a change process, it can be used to reflect, but it can also be used to forward plan. And what I've seen from teams who have used this is it really helps to empower team members to think about what their role is in that, to be able to contribute to that direction they want to head in, and it helps to energize teams as well. And final one I've got on this topic is ideas for celebrating success. So I know quite a few people have looked at this one. Really good recognition tool. And really, I'd say this isn't really a tool itself, but it's more of a suggestion list of how teams can give recognition and celebrate in different ways. This is one which is made up from ideas from different teams. We definitely can't take credit for this in the OD team. This is one that we've seen from different teams use across our organisation that have had really innovative things that we see, and we're always astounded by the innovation that does go on from different teams across the NHS. But really what this resource is a list of different ideas for how a team can focus on recognition. So there's things in there like appreciation boards, social media shout outs, there's team fun days or individual recognition opportunities. So what I often find when teams look at this, it gives them food for thought. There might be certain things which they'll rule out, and that's fine, because not every one of these approaches is for every team. Every team's slightly different in terms of what their preferences are, but what it does do is it prompts that conversation and gets them thinking around what is right for us, what can we do to celebrate, what are the things that we can try. And I often find in myself saying to teams, just have a go at one or two of these, and once you've tried them, you'll get a feel for, do they work for us, is that right for us right now. And what quite a lot of teams do is they'll choose one of these now, and when they come to do the next TED, they'll say, right, what's the next thing on the list? We're going to try something different, we're going to keep it fresh and invigorate the way we approach recognition. But a really useful tool, and I know lots of teams use that one. Sam, yeah, I noticed you've been mugged. Definitely one we've seen in our trust. Do you want to just share what you've been mugged is, Sam?
Yeah, I'll try and find a picture and put it in the chat. They had a cup, I think it had a nice message on, and they just put chocolates and sweets in, and then you could leave it on someone's desk with a post-it note saying thank you or something like that. And then that person then had that mug and they can then pass it on. So it's kind of a little bit of a kindness, passing on the kindness as well, and passing on the recognition. And we liked it so much that in our thank you week in December last year, we actually went out and made some You've Been Mugged kits. So we had a little bit of money in our thing. So we got 50 mugs, 50 lots of sweets, and popped them in, and a little bit of a introduction on how to use it. And then we said the first 50 team leaders who gets in touch can have a You've Been Mugged kit. And for us, that felt like that's 50 teams doing local recognition. So it kind of spread the locality of recognition as well, which I thought was really good. One of my favorite things about this resource, Lee, is that if a team leader is using this with their team to just share, this isn't something a team leader has to do. They can absolutely hand ownership over of this to someone in the team or a couple of people in the team. And so that really then pulls in that idea that the action plan is for everybody to be responsible for and to own and to do. Because I think team leaders often come into TED feeling like this means I'm going to have more things to do. but actually it doesn't. And this is a really good way of going. One of them could be around recognition. Here's some ideas. And also, you don't have to do it. Someone in your team might want to do this. And it's a nice thing to do. It's a bit of creativity. So it could really support someone as well to have a little bit of something different in their role in the trust. So there you go. That's my view.
Definitely, yeah, brilliant. Thanks for sharing, Sam. And yeah, I think that's a great way that it adds a bit of fun to it as well, and it helps to energize teams by doing something like this. As you say, different members of the team can get involved in it. I also think it's one of those, I'm probably showing my age now, but I think they call it Instagrammable things these days, that you put things on social media and other teams see it and say, oh, well, we'll have a go at that. So it has that ripple effect onto others as well. So yeah, great tool to use. Katie, you had your hand up there briefly. Did you want to come in?
Yeah, I was just going to say, we did something similar when I was in health and wellbeing. We had You've Been Mugged with a set little saying that people could adapt it if they wanted to make it more personal, but exactly the same thing. Just buy a mug, put a few bits in it, leave it on somebody's desk anonymously, and then hopefully they pass it on. We got it from one of our health and wellbeing champions, and when she left, we kind of set it out there so all the other teams could do it. And within a couple of months, when we did like a little search on Facebook, it was like massive across the trust. It was really good. But I might just pass your idea about if there's any funds in health and wellbeing to kind of do what you did to encourage team leaders to get on board with it. I think that's a really good idea.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's such a great idea and a great bit of fun. Chloe, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, I was just going to say, we're actually about to launch a piece of work around a refreshed approach towards recognition within the trust. So we're already trying to think of those links between, the core theme in TED around recognition, and using that as a good opportunity to say, here's everything you could do with your team. Why don't you use TED to find out, how your team feel about whether they're sort of recognised for and celebrated, and just trying to find those connections and sharing tools like this to get people thinking about what they could do locally and not just relying on things centrally to recognise their staff.
That's marvelous. Yeah, and I think the more we can get teams to do this locally, it does have that ripple effect. That positivity can be contagious when teams get on board with it, and you really get some momentum. Oh, another hand up there. Could I? Would you like to come in?
Yeah, I was just going to say that from an organizational kind of level, I initiated something called trolley dashes, where we go round across our organization, talking to our colleagues, and sometimes we give them little incentives to say we appreciate you for the work you do. So sometimes we get invited to team meetings. Sometimes we just show up at awards, and you can see the kind of like joy, especially people are not expecting our visit, and we just show up and we sort of like tell them the support that's available for them through our improvement and culture team. Then obviously when they listen, we give them a lovely gift to say we care for you.
Marvelous. Yeah, and it's amazing how those just little bits of recognition just mean so much to people, and that recognition, because when we are so busy, sometimes these opportunities get missed. So simple things like that, those opportunities to give recognition, can have such a big impact. Okay, I do realise we're sort of short of time. I've just popped in the chat a link to feedback for today's session. One of the things I'd like you to think about is give us feedback on today. I hope you've enjoyed that and insight, and it's given you some ideas of tools you can use. But in the feedback, if you could, if there are any other team situations which I haven't covered today, which you'd like us to do a similar session on, let us know about it, because we're keen for these to come out. What I'm thinking of doing in terms of the way I edit this video, I might come up, do some short videos on each of the topics. Then you can share that with teams who are maybe in that type of situation, so you can use that. But in summary from today is really, there's different toolkits for different team situations. The culture and context for every different team is different, but the toolkits that we have in TED are things that can be flexed to different types of team scenarios. And finally, just to give you a signpost to our next event. So I know a few of you come to our regular coffee catch-up. So our next one of those is on Tuesday, the 13th of August. And our next Lunch and Learn will be focusing around using TED with teams who perhaps aren't familiar with technology and ways you can support those sorts of teams. So that's on Friday, the 30th of August. And then our next quarterly deep dive, dare I say it, we're coming up to staff survey time of year, we'll be focusing around some of that staff survey focus, as we do every year, and thinking how can you use TED to support that staff survey work and really complement it in a great way. But thank you all for contributing today. It's been lovely to see you all, and we'll see you again next time. Thanks, everyone.